Film strips had a great part in my early life. I always used those in ministry. So I took them to Africa, thought this would be great. And so we started showing them there.
It was something so new to the African people where we were because we were so far out in the bush. And just to see them come together and watch the amazement.
Well, the people loved them. It was just all new to them. Most of them hadn't even seen a car, but they were fascinated by the car. They were fascinated by the house in the background that was made of wood. You'd never do that in Africa because of termites.
When the Africans saw this chivalrousness that we as Americans have had, ladies first, our wives first, and so forth, they always felt men had to go first.
And the Africans wanted to know why he was a coward, because in their cultures, the man always went in first to protect the woman. So something as subtle as that stuck out to them and distracted them from the message that Dad was trying to get across to them. That's when he realized that this is not going to work. So we've got to do something different.
And there was one young man, his name was Michael Yandoro. We were working on the roof of the hospital. He said, "Mr. Nutt, everyone wants to see those film strips. Why'd you stop showing them?" So I explained things like they could respond to a man helping his neighbor on his ox cart, but not on a car. And so he said, "Well, you take pictures. Why don't you make your own?"
Make our own. From these few words, just a drop of an idea would flow the global organization of Good News Productions. The first film strips were simple, but the ministry quickly developed and expanded into a facility with production, education, follow-up, and distribution capabilities. But as word got out, growing pains emerged.
Missionaries around the world heard about what we were doing in Africa. Jerry Watkinson from Mexico wrote and said, "Could you help us do the same?" Madonna Burgett had been with us in Africa, saw the work there. She said, "Could you come to India and help us do the same?" Dean Davis from Zambia, the same way. He said, "I'll send Kay Watts down and she can help write the scripts even, but could you help us?" My immediate response to these initial requests was there's no way we could help. We had no intention of ever leaving Africa. On June 7th, our daughter was born, our second daughter. She was slow to develop.
We knew that she was slower than the other children had been, but it took some time before it really surfaced that she had a special need.
She would never be able to function on her own in any way. So we accepted that for what it was because we were there. We had every facility that other people in Africa had. Why should we have any advantage because we were from the United States of America? Helen's parents had been to Africa. They visited us. They saw the work of what had become Good News Productions, but a year later, they sold a piece of property, sent a check actually for $2,000, and said, "Would you at least consider bringing Linda back to the USA for an assessment?" So in 1973, I and our 7-year-old daughter, Linda at the time, came to the USA, found that there were facilities here. So Linda and I then went back to Africa, and I said to Helen, "I really don't think that I can resist any longer, regardless of how effective the work is. I feel like I owe it to you and to our other children and to the family and to Linda to go back to the USA."
We thought we were going to be there the rest of our lives, so it was sad because, that was home.
Helen has always been the steady one. She takes things in stride much better than I do. I was devastated.
Linda was so transparent, and she called me my old preacher. Lynn Pitts, who was one of the primary workers that helped her. If he and his wife came into church late, Linda would stand up and say, "Here's Pitts." He spoke at her funeral, and he said, "I expect when I get to heaven, Linda's going to jump up and say, 'Here's Pitts. He's a little late, but he made it, you know.'"
Many have said over the years, without Linda, Good News Productions probably would never become international. I think that's true.
Upon arriving back in the USA, God's purpose soon became clear. Supporting churches came together to help form Good News Productions, now international, as a non-profit with the leadership and vision needed for decades to come.
I had already had an opportunity to travel internationally in merchandising breeding stock in the pig business. And so I thought, what Ziden has planned and what he is wanting to do to take the gospel to the whole world, hey, we can do that.
They really got excited, as much as they could understand, about cultural differences.
And I think he surrounded himself, and the board himself was a very open-minded group of men.
One preacher from my home church, he said, "Ziden, the people trust you and Helen 100%. I don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about, but we're behind you if you believe that's where God wants you to go."
And I think Ziden's leadership to be in front of the next innovation, it drove me and others on our board to get a glimpse of what was possible.
The formation of the ministry helped facilitate the use of cutting-edge technology as years went on, bringing the gospel to more and more audiences.
Dad had helped produce film strips for the Morse family to use over in Thailand, Burma, going up into Laos. He talked to several different people, and they came up with a plan where they could get a 12-volt film strip projector that would also show slides, and they put together this kit that was originally called the audiovisual kit, and that's really the birth of what is now the modern day solar kit, as we call them.
We were the only organization that we know of in the USA that was producing things in the local language of people around the world. We were the only people that had anything like one of these backpacks, a solar kit on a backpack. That was the thing that got us involved with NASA.
Dad had been involved in some satellite projects through a group called Project Lookup and became very knowledgeable in how satellite transmission worked. We could get the message on the video productions that they were doing, not only to the churches here in America, but literally to about a third of the Earth's surface.
There was a time when the Ventures in Faith were on the satellite. Personal testimony is a powerful tool.
As technology developed, so did the face of the organization as well.
So we were doing a lot of work for projects in India. By 1985, it had really become a major part of what we were doing. David Long had been sort of dropped off here by his dad, Dr. Vijay Long. And he had had a 4-year degree in electronics.
Ziden said, "We don't have any internship program here." And I kind of insisted that I want to do this. So I became the first intern GNPI had.
January 19th of 1988, we broke ground for a studio there. We could not do all that production here, so we thought the natural thing, put a studio in India.
Over time, opportunities continued to arise for regional centers across the globe, resulting in offices next in Thailand and Kenya, then Mexico, the Philippines, Eurasia, Southeast Asia, and Uganda.
Ziden's vision for GNPI for producing culturally relevant materials, that really resonated with me. When he said, produce it in Tagalog, produce it in something that the people will really be able to relate to, I understood that. And so in 2003, we started GNPI Philippines formally, and that's when I became the regional director.
One of the most important things and the most impactful things in my life is being able to work with so many wonderful people. And even though we may be so drastically different, because we are part of His body, we have this family that is second to none.
You know, even if you speak different languages, there's that love that binds you. You're so far away from each other, and yet you feel close to one another because of the work that we're doing together.
The network not only expanded, but also shared resources. This didn't just lead to multilingual projects, but also multicultural films, starting from the same script, but adjusted and completed in its own local production.
Tough Choices was a really hallmark production for us when we were in Kenya at the regional center there, and I had the opportunity to serve as the regional director there. It was a time in Kenya where the sanctity of life issue had hit national proportions. Little did we know that when we wrote the story and did the film, that elections in Kenya would come to the top, and it would be the president and his cabinet who would say, we are going to be pro-life. And oh, by the way, there's this film, Tough Choices, that's going to authenticate the fact of how important sanctity of life is.
Sergei Golan from Ukraine said, wow, our teenagers are facing many of the same thing. Could we do the same thing? We said, sure. And so he got the script and rewrote it, of course, for the Ukrainian culture. Bob Gerwell from Mexico said, wow, we've got to do that there. And the other regional centers did the same thing.
And so it began to help us see that we have a blueprint. It has to be adjusted a little bit, the script and everything, but the main issue, the main theological matters on how to address that are all the same.
As such productions reached global coverage, a new tool, the internet, allowed content to be distributed easily across the whole planet.
It drastically improved our distribution network. So instead of paying around $600 per hour for a digital satellite signal, literally for 17 cents an hour, 24 hours a day, people around the world could access the GNPI programs by using the internet.
Project Nomad is a desire to train the next generation of media disciples. We learned that we can create that teaching and training online.
GNPI going and physically training, much as it's still relevant, it was impractical. So for us to increase and speed up the process of equipping saints, then we developed Nomad Academy online.
So 100 Lights was a vision that we wanted to use cohort training and then also online training like Nomad Academy to train new students who use their phones to create content for their countries, their communities, and so forth.
We counted these individuals as lights. So we had set that by the end of 2025, we would have trained 100 individuals who are actively producing content. And yes, we did reach the goal.
100 Lights is a goal that will continue to define the ministry of GNPI far past its completion. The same is true of another of its worldwide initiatives.
Well, it started out of a season of prayer that we as staff and board were saying, God, where do you want to take us next as an organization? And so we had a day of prayer and fasting. And I walked out that day and asked my executive assistant, Adam, is every 15-minute section now covered for the 24-hour prayer time? And he said, well, there's one time about 3 o'clock in the morning, our time, Mike. I said to God, if you want me to wake up, you're going to have to wake me up. You don't tell those kind of things to God. Because about 2:45, I woke up with a horrible foot cramp in my left leg. Okay, God, I get it. I started to watch the 15-minute video that we had made to help people pray through the 15-minute slots about the lostness of people around the world. And it went like that. I went, my goodness. So I did it again. And I did it again. And it was this whisper that said, was that really hard, Mike? To get up? To pray for people who don't know me? I want you at GNPI to deliver my message to 1 billion people. That's not possible. And God said, yeah, without me. But with me, it's possible. So Mission 15 was born.
GNPI started on red African dirt, but swept across land and oceans to reach many nations. And it's the depth of its God-grown roots that allow it to push with strength into a God-held future.
It was very fortunate that I had a hometown preacher when I was making my decision to go to Bible college, into mission work and so forth, that Don Hargrave looked at me and said, you know, Sonny, this is so exciting. He said, for the first time in my life, I can see where we could get the gospel into every culture around the world. In fact, I said to him, I said, well, what do you think about Habakkuk 2:14?
And I think Habakkuk 2:14 with Ziden and others in GNPI, this was the message that God gave to them. And I think that it's a star by which they steered.
You got to have a vision big enough that you don't think you can get there, because you can't by yourself. You have to have the blessing from above.
When I have seen people in high-rise apartments in Singapore and the numbers of people that crossed on the streets, when I see the numbers of people that have been in the slums that I have worked with in Nairobi, Kenya, I'm going, how are we going to reach them?
Because of social media, the gospel really covers the earth like waters cover the sea. We're able to reach people we would never reach in person.
Media can take me there and touch them and reach them and bring them into a kingdom that I enjoy living in.
I see GNPI as a co-worker with Christ to fulfill this.
And though we're strategic, we're careful, we're mindful of the way we distribute our posts, we also pray that God will do His part to touch the hearts of people, to reach out to the people who really need to hear God's message.
We will go wherever we need to go. We'll use whatever technology we need to use. The mandate is not to go where the path is easy, but the mandate is to go until every ear has heard and every tongue has the opportunity to confess His name.
From film strips to the way things are done by phone today, I mean, we believed that scripture when we read it, but we didn't see how that possibly was going to be able to happen. And now it's so obvious that it's in God's working, in His timing, that can happen.
We talked about it, we looked at it. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Don Hargrave said, that's it. It's going to be done, and God's going to do it through you.
Will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.